The sound echoed through the street, sharp, sudden, unmistakable. A police officer's hand came down hard, striking the man standing calmly in front of him. People froze. Phones slipped halfway out of pockets. Conversations died mid-sentence. For a split second, even traffic noise seemed to fade, as if the world itself had paused to witness what had just happened. The officer scoffed, mistaking silence for fear. "Don't just stand there," he snapped. "You think you're special or something?" The man slowly turned his head back toward him. No anger, no panic, just steady eyes and controlled breathing. He adjusted his jacket, as if more concerned about wrinkled fabric than the blow he had just taken. A woman near the sidewalk whispered, "Did he really just hit him?" Another voice followed, shaky and unsure, "That guy looks familiar." The officer laughed loudly, feeding off the attention. "What are you all staring at? You've never seen someone get put in their place." The man finally spoke, his voice calm, almost gentle. "There's no need for this." That calm only irritated the officer more. "You don't tell me what's necessary," he barked, stepping closer, chest puffed out, power on full display. The crowd grew. Someone started recording. A passing car slowed to a crawl. No one noticed the way the man's posture never changed. No one noticed how relaxed his hands remained at his sides. And no one, not the officer, not the crowd, fully understood the weight of what they were witnessing in that moment. Because the man who had just been struck wasn't weak. He wasn't afraid. And what he chose to do next would leave everyone there questioning what real strength actually looks like. Just an hour earlier, the day had begun like any other. The town moved at its usual pace, slow, familiar, predictable. Shop doors chimed open and shut. A delivery truck idled near the corner cafe. People waved at faces they recognized, comforted by routine. Nothing about the afternoon hinted that it would soon become unforgettable. The man at the center of it all had arrived quietly. No escort, no announcement, no attention drawn his way. He parked his car along the street and stepped out, dressed simply. Jeans, a neutral jacket, worn boots. The kind of outfit that blended into a crowd instead of standing above it. He paused briefly, helping an elderly man retrieve a dropped bag of groceries, offering a nod and a small smile before continuing on his way. To anyone watching, he looked like just another passerby, and that was exactly how he preferred it. Across town, however, someone else was having a very different kind of day. Officer Daniels had been on edge since the morning. A reprimand from his supervisor, a missed promotion, a feeling heavy and unresolved that he wasn't being taken seriously. He wore his uniform stiffly, jaw tight, eyes scanning for something, anything that might restore his sense of control. Power to him wasn't about protection. It was about dominance. As he cruised down the street, he noticed the parked car. Nothing remarkable about it. But when he saw the man step back onto the sidewalk, calm and unbothered, something about that composure irritated him. Too relaxed, too confident, too unconcerned. Officer Daniels pulled over. The man turned, surprised but cooperative, hands visible, posture relaxed. There was no resistance, no attitude, only patience. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked politely. Daniels didn't answer right away. He circled him slowly, eyes narrowing, as if searching for a reason rather than evidence. "You people always say that," he muttered. The man remained calm, his tone steady. "If I've done something wrong, I'd like to understand." That response should have eased the situation. Instead, it did the opposite. The officer interpreted politeness as challenge, calm as defiance. And in that moment, he decided this wasn't just a stop, it was an opportunity. Nearby, a few pedestrians slowed down, sensing tension. A shop owner leaned against his doorway. Someone across the street folded their arms and watched. Here's the question for you watching right now. Have you ever seen someone abused simply because they stayed calm? Type yes or a no in the comments. The man didn't raise his voice, didn't argue, didn't provoke. He stood there composed, respectful, unaware that his restraint was being mistaken for weakness. And the officer, he mistook authority for entitlement. As the gap between them narrowed, the air grew heavier. Something was about to break, either the tension or someone's pride. And no one there yet realized how far this moment was about to go. Officer Daniels stopped directly in front of the man, close enough that their shoes nearly touched. The badge on his chest caught the light as he straightened his shoulders, asserting his presence without saying a word. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "License," Daniels finally said, holding out his hand. The man nodded and reached slowly toward his pocket, careful not to make any sudden movements. He retrieved his wallet and handed it over calmly, his eyes never leaving the officer's face. Daniels flipped it open, scanning the card longer than necessary. His brow furrowed, not because he'd found something wrong, but because he hadn't. "You always this relaxed during a stop?" the officer asked, his tone sharp. "I don't see a reason not to be," the man replied evenly. "I'm cooperating." That word cooperating seemed to strike a nerve. Daniels snapped the wallet shut and stepped closer. "Don't tell me how to do my job." The man didn't back away. He didn't step forward either. He simply stood there, grounded, as if he had nothing to prove. Around them, the sidewalk had grown crowded. A woman pretended to scroll on her phone while secretly recording. Two teenagers whispered to each other, eyes wide. A shop owner across the street leaned out farther now, curiosity overtaking caution. "Have you noticed how tension spreads before anything actually happens?" Drop a in the comments if you've ever felt that moment, when you knew something was about to go wrong. Daniels turned slightly, aware of the attention, and his voice grew louder. "What are you doing in this area?" he demanded. "Just passing through," the man answered. "Thought I'd stop for a bit." "That's not an answer. It's the truth." The officer let out a short, mocking laugh. "You think you're smarter than me?" "No," the man said. "I think we're both just people." That did it. Daniels took a sharp step forward, step away from the vehicle. The man complied immediately, moving exactly as instructed. Hands still visible, body language open and non-threatening. Yet the officer's frustration only intensified. Every rule was being followed, every instruction obeyed, and somehow that made him angrier. He paced in a tight circle, radio crackling softly at his shoulder. His jaw clenched. His grip tightened around the wallet he still hadn't returned. "You know," Daniels said slowly, "people like you always act innocent." The man tilted his head slightly. "People like me." Daniels ignored the question. "You think wearing that calm face makes you untouchable?" "I don't think that at all," the man replied. "I just believe situations don't have to escalate." For a split second, something flickered across the officer's face, hesitation maybe. But it vanished just as quickly, replaced by irritation. Behind them someone muttered, "This is getting out of hand." Another voice whispered, "Why is he pushing so hard?" If you're watching this right now, ask yourself honestly, who do you think was really in control at this moment? Comment OFICR or man below. Daniels suddenly shoved the wallet back into the man's chest. "You don't get to decide that." The man caught it easily, steady as ever. "I'm not deciding anything." Their eyes locked. The street felt smaller, quieter, as if everything beyond that circle had faded into the background. Even the onlookers seemed to sense they were witnessing a turning point. Daniels lifted his chin, "Hands behind your back." The man paused, not in resistance, but in confusion. "Am I being detained?" "I asked you a question," Daniels snapped. "Am I being detained?" He repeated calmly. That question, simple, respectful, legal, landed like an insult. Daniels' face flushed. His breathing quickened. He glanced briefly at the growing crowd, then back at the man who still hadn't raised his voice once. In that instant, the officer made a choice. Not based on law, not based on safety, but on pride. And as his hand moved forward, the tension that had been building for minutes finally snapped, setting the stage for a moment no one there would ever forget. It happened faster than anyone expected. Officer Daniels' hand came up sharply, not in warning, not in restraint, but in force. The strike landed cleanly, loud enough that the sound cut through the air like a crack of thunder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman covered her mouth. Someone cursed under their breath. A phone slipped from trembling fingers and hit the pavement, screen still recording. The man staggered half a step, not from pain, but from surprise. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself, then straightened his posture as if regaining balance mattered more than the blow itself. Officer Daniels scoffed. "You see what happens when you don't listen?" The man said nothing. He lifted a hand calmly, not to retaliate, not to shield himself, but to adjust his jacket, smoothing the fabric where it had shifted. The gesture was so ordinary, so controlled, that it confused everyone watching. That silence unnerved the officer. "You think that makes you tough?" Daniels snapped, voice rising. "Standing there like you're above it all." Still, the man didn't respond. His eyes remained steady, focused, not on the officer's fist, but on his face. There was no fear in them, no rage, just awareness. A murmur spread through the crowd. Why isn't he fighting back? Is he in shock? Someone should say something. A middle-aged man took a step forward, then stopped himself. No one wanted to be next. Officer Daniels mistook the quiet for victory. "That's what I thought," he said, pacing slightly, adrenaline surging. People like you fold the second you're reminded who's in charge. The man finally spoke, his voice low, measured, almost disappointed. There was no need for that. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Daniels froze for half a second, then laughed, sharp and hollow. You don't get to tell me what's necessary. He stepped closer again, invading the man's space, daring him to react. And that was when something subtle shifted. Not in the man's stance, not in his expression, but in the energy around them. The crowd grew quieter, not frozen this time, but alert. As if instinctively, people sensed they were standing on the edge of something irreversible. A woman whispered, "This is wrong." Someone else said, "That officer's out of control." The man took a slow breath. You could see it, his chest rising, falling. He looked down briefly, then back up, meeting Daniel's eyes again. "Son," he said gently, "you don't want this moment to define you." The officer's face twisted. "Don't call me that." "I'm not trying to disrespect you," the man replied. "I'm trying to stop you." That sentence landed heavier than any threat could have. Daniel's hand tightened into a fist. "Stop me from what?" "From crossing a line you can't uncross." For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across the officer's face. But it was swallowed whole by pride. He turned toward the crowd. "You all see this? He thinks he knows better." No one answered. Phones were up now, dozens of them. Silent witnesses capturing every second. The man noticed. He glanced around at the people watching, then back at the officer. "This doesn't end the way you think it does." That was when someone near the back spoke up, their voice shaking. "Officer, maybe that's enough." Daniels spun around. "Stay out of it." The man flinched, not at the shout, but at the anger behind it. He shook his head slowly. "I'm still standing here," he said. "I haven't raised my hands against you. I haven't disrespected you. And yet you struck me." Daniels stepped back in front of him, face flushed, breathing uneven. "You don't get to question me." "I'm not questioning you," the man said softly. "I'm asking you to think." The street felt impossibly quiet now. No horns, no chatter, just the sound of a man choosing restraint while another lost control. And in that charged silence, as the officer raised his voice again and the crowd leaned closer, one undeniable truth settled over everyone watching. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a test, and the outcome was about to change everything. At first, no one moved. The air felt thick, heavy with disbelief. People looked at one another, silently asking the same question. Did that really just happen? Phones were now fully raised, no longer hidden. Recording wasn't accidental anymore. It was deliberate. A young man near the curb spoke under his breath. "This is going to be bad." Officer Daniels noticed the cameras. His eyes flicked from screen to screen, catching his own reflection in the glass. For a brief moment, uncertainty crept in. But instead of stepping back, he straightened his posture, lifting his chin as if to remind everyone who he believed was in control. "Put those phones away," he barked. No one listened. The man who had been struck remained still. He didn't rub his face, didn't complain, didn't demand anything. He simply stood there, calm in a way that now felt intentional rather than passive. A woman finally found her voice. "You didn't have to hit him." Daniel snapped his head toward her. "Stay back." "He wasn't doing anything," another person added. The officer turned back to the man, irritation boiling over. "You see what you started." The man shook his head slowly. "I didn't start anything." That quiet reply seemed to tilt the situation even further out of balance. From down the street, the sound of footsteps approached, measured, confident. A second patrol car pulled up and a veteran officer stepped out. His movements were calm, practiced. He scanned the crowd, then the scene, and then his eyes landed on the man in the jacket. He froze. Not dramatically, not visibly to everyone, but enough. The veteran officer took one step closer, squinting slightly, as if trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he knew. Officer Daniels noticed. "Everything's under control," he said quickly, too quickly. The veteran didn't answer. His gaze remained fixed on the man. Someone in the crowd whispered, barely audible but unmistakable, "Wait, isn't that?" Another voice followed, "No way." The man sensed the shift. He turned his head slightly, acknowledging the officer who had just arrived, giving a small, respectful nod. That nod said more than words. The veteran officer swallowed hard. "Daniels," he said carefully, "what's going on here?" Daniels waved a hand dismissively. "Just someone giving me a hard time." The crowd reacted immediately. "That's not true. He was calm the whole time. You hit him." Voices overlapped now, growing bolder. The balance of power was shifting, not through force, but through witnesses. Here's a question for you watching. Have you ever seen a moment where silence suddenly turned into accountability? Type TRNMDNT in the comments if you feel it now. Daniel's jaw tightened. Everyone needs to step back. No one did. The veteran officer took another look at the man, his expression changing from confusion to recognition. His posture softened. Respect replaced authority, sir, he said quietly. That single word sent a ripple through the crowd. Daniels blinked. Sir? The man nodded back. The tension spiked. Daniels turned sharply. You know this guy? The veteran hesitated just long enough to make the answer unavoidable. Yes, he said. I do? The murmurs grew louder. Who is he? Why is he calling him sir? Daniel's confidence faltered. He laughed nervously. You're telling me this guy's special now? The veteran officer didn't laugh. You should take a step back. That was the moment the color drained from Daniel's face. He looked again at the man he'd struck, really looked this time. The calm, the composure, the lack of fear, the complete absence of panic. The man met his eyes not with anger, but with something far more unsettling, disappointment. The crowd fell silent once more, sensing the reveal creeping closer. Phones zoomed in, hearts raced, and just before anyone could say the name out loud, just before the truth fully landed, the moment tipped. What everyone had assumed was a simple abuse of power was about to become something far bigger, because the man standing there wasn't just calm. He was known, and the realization was about to hit Officer Daniels all at once. The veteran officer took a slow breath, as if steadying himself before stepping into something unavoidable. He turned slightly toward Officer Daniels. You need to relax, he said, his voice firm but controlled. Right now. Daniels let out a short, uneasy laugh. Relax, he's the one causing a scene. No one in the crowd reacted to that. Not a single nod, not a single word of agreement. The veteran officer ignored the comment and looked back at the man. His tone shifted lower, respectful. Sir, I didn't realize you were here. The man offered a small nod. That's understandable. That exchange was all it took. The crowd leaned in instinctively. Phones zoomed closer. A quiet ripple of whispers spread like electricity moving through the air. Why is he talking to him like that? Did you hear his tone? Who is this guy? Daniel's smile faded. Hold on, he said, glancing between them. What's going on? The veteran officer hesitated, clearly aware that whatever came next would change everything. He chose his words carefully. This man, he said, wasn't just some random civilian. Daniel scoffed, but the sound lacked confidence. So what? He's important now. The man finally spoke again, not to correct him, but to slow things down. There's no need to make this bigger than it already is. That only made it bigger. The veteran officer turned to Daniels fully now. You struck him, he said. It wasn't a question. Daniels bristled. He was being non-compliant. The crowd reacted immediately. That was calm. We saw everything. The veteran raised a hand, quieting them without effort. He never took his eyes off Daniels. You need to understand something, he said. This man has spent his life teaching discipline, restraint and respect for law enforcement, for civilians, for everyone. Daniels frowned. What are you talking about? The officer looked back at the man once more, then spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. You put your hands on someone who is known worldwide for self-control. The name finally escaped the crowd in a breathless whisper. Then another voice said it louder, and another. Recognition spread like wildfire. Daniel's face went pale. He looked again at the man's posture, the calm stance, the steady eyes, the complete lack of reaction to being struck. Understanding hit him all at once. You, his voice cracked. You're. The man raised a hand, gently stopping him. Names don't matter right now. But they already did. Daniels took a step back, his confidence collapsing in real time. I didn't know, he said quickly. I swear I didn't know who you were. The man studied him for a moment, not with anger, not with triumph, with clarity. That's exactly the point, he said. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Silence settled over the street again, different this time. Heavier, reflective. The veteran officer cleared his throat. Sir, how would you like to proceed? Every camera focused on the man. Every breath seemed to pause, waiting for the answer. Daniels looked like he might collapse. Please, he said quietly. I'll do whatever you want. The man shook his head slowly. This isn't about what I want. He glanced at the crowd, at the phones, at the people who had watched everything unfold. This is about what happens next. He turned back to the veteran officer. Make sure this is handled properly. By the book. The veteran nodded immediately. Yes, sir, Daniel's shoulders slumped. The weight of his actions finally settled in. Sirens could be heard in the distance now, backup arriving, protocols activating, consequences moving into place. But the man who had been struck. He took a step back, creating space, refusing to stand above anyone. "I came here quietly," he said. "I'll leave the same way." And with that, he turned slightly, not to walk away from responsibility, but to let it land where it belonged. The reveal was complete. And nothing about this situation would ever be the same again. The street remained silent long after the words settled. Everyone expected something else. Anger, demands, retaliation. The kind of response that would feel justified after what had just happened. Cameras stayed locked on the man, waiting for the moment he would claim his power. But he didn't. Instead, he turned slightly toward the veteran officer. "Before anything else happens," he said calmly, "I'd like a moment to speak with him." "Privately?" A murmur rolled through the crowd. Daniels looked up sharply. "With me?" The man nodded once. "Yes." Confusion crossed the officer's face. He had braced himself for punishment, not conversation. The veteran officer hesitated, then nodded. "All right," he said. "Over here?" They stepped a few feet away, not far enough to escape the cameras completely, but enough to lower their voices. The crowd leaned in anyway, sensing this was the moment that mattered most. Daniels swallowed hard. "Sir, The man raised a hand, stopping him. "You don't need to explain yet." Daniels clenched his fists at his sides, his voice shaking. "I didn't know who you were." The man met his eyes. "I know." That response caught him off guard. "You know?" Daniels asked. "Yes," the man said. "And that's why this matters." He took a slow breath. "When you looked at me earlier, you didn't see a threat. You didn't see danger. You saw someone you believed you could control." Daniel's shoulders sagged. "I lost my temper." "You lost your perspective," the man corrected gently, "and that happens faster than people realize." Daniel stared at the ground. "I ruined everything." The man shook his head. "No, you revealed something." Daniels looked up, confused.
"What?"
The man's voice remained steady. "Who you become when no one stops you." That hit harder than the strike ever could. Daniel's eyes filled. "I never wanted to be this kind of officer." "Few people do," the man said. "It happens when pride replaces purpose." For a moment, neither spoke. The crowd watched, unsure whether they were witnessing mercy or something more severe. The man finally continued. "I could demand consequences, and they will come, regardless of what I say. That's not in my control." Daniels nodded slowly. "But what is in my control?" the man said. "It's how I respond." Daniels' voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" The man looked past him, toward the people recording. "Because everyone here is learning something, including you." He turned back. "Power doesn't mean you get to decide someone's worth. It means you're responsible for protecting it." Daniels wiped his face quickly, ashamed. "I don't deserve forgiveness. That's not for you to decide." The man replied. "It's for you to earn." Daniels straightened slightly. "I'll accept whatever happens." The man nodded. "Good." He took a step back, ending the private moment. The veteran officer approached again. "Sir." The man spoke clearly now, knowing every word would be heard. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm not pressing anything beyond what the process requires." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "But," he added, "I want one thing on record." The officer waited. "That this moment be used to teach restraint, not fear." Daniels closed his eyes. The man looked at him one last time. "What happens next will define you more than what already has." Then he turned away, leaving Daniels standing there. Not spared from consequences, but given something far rarer, a chance to change. And for the first time since the incident began, the crowd understood. This wasn't forgiveness. It was accountability with purpose. The arrival of additional patrol cars marked the shift from confrontation to procedure. Lights flashed softly against storefront windows, painting the street in red and blue. Officers stepped out with measured movements, their expressions serious but controlled. The veteran officer spoke quietly with them, gesturing toward Officer Daniels, then toward the man standing a short distance away. Daniels was escorted aside. No handcuffs, no shouting, just the unmistakable weight of accountability settling onto his shoulders. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. He walked with his head lowered, fully aware that every step was being recorded, not just by phones but by memory. The crowd watched closely. Some expected drama. Others expected vengeance. Neither came. The man remained where he was, hands relaxed, posture unchanged. He spoke briefly with the veteran officer, nodding once his procedures were explained. There was no anger in his expression, only resolve. "This will be reviewed," the officer assured him. By the book. That's all I ask, the man replied. Word spread quickly through the crowd. Not gossip, understanding. He's not protecting him. He's not attacking him either. He's letting the system work. If you're watching right now, ask yourself this. How often do you see someone choose justice over revenge when they have the power to do either? Type Jace in the comments if this moment stands out to you. Officer Daniels sat on the curb now, hands clasped together, staring at the pavement. The bravado was gone. In its place was something quieter and far more uncomfortable. Reality. A supervisor arrived, reviewing footage on a phone. Another officer took statements from witnesses. Each detail was noted, each moment documented. Daniels looked up briefly, his eyes meeting the man's for just a second. The man didn't glare, didn't smirk, didn't look away. He simply held eye contact, calm, steady, unflinching. That look said everything. No escape, no shortcuts, no special treatment. The supervisor approached the man. Sir, he said respectfully, we appreciate your cooperation. There will be an internal investigation. Temporary suspension is being issued. The man nodded. That's appropriate. Those words carried weight. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Acceptance. The crowd began to disperse slowly. Conversations low and reflective rather than excited. People weren't buzzing with adrenaline anymore. They were thinking. A young woman turned to her friend. I've never seen someone handle power like that. Another replied. He didn't even raise his voice. The man overheard none of it. Or perhaps he did, and simply chose not to react. Before leaving, he spoke once more to the veteran officer. Make sure he's offered support, he said. Accountability matters, but so does guidance. The officer nodded. I will. Daniels heard that. His shoulders slumped further, overwhelmed not by punishment, but by the understanding that he had been seen completely. The man took one final look around the street. The place where tension had nearly exploded now felt subdued, humbled. This moment would be discussed, debated, replayed. But its power didn't come from conflict, it came from restraint. As the man finally turned to leave, someone in the crowd called out, "Thank you." He paused briefly, offering a small nod in response. No speech, no statement, no victory lap. Just a quiet exit. Behind him, the system moved forward, imperfect, necessary, and now impossible to ignore. And Officer Daniels. He sat alone with his thoughts, facing consequences he couldn't escape, but also facing something unexpected, a chance to rebuild, not through force, but through change. The arrival of additional patrol cars marked the clear shift from confrontation to consequence. Red and blue lights reflected off the storefront windows, bathing the street in slow pulses of color. Officers stepped out calmly, their movements deliberate, professional. There was no shouting, no chaos, just procedure taking over where emotion had nearly spiraled out of control. Officer Daniels was guided a few steps away from the crowd. No handcuffs, no public humiliation, just accountability. He didn't resist. The arrogance that had fueled him earlier was gone, replaced by a hollow awareness of what he had set in motion. His shoulders were tense, his hands clasped together as if holding himself in place. The man remained where he was, still calm, still composed, still refusing to stand above anyone even now. The veteran officer spoke quietly with supervisors as footage was reviewed on a phone. Statements were taken, names recorded. Each detail mattered now, and everyone present understood that this moment would not disappear when the lights faded. Daniels was asked to sit on the curb. He obeyed without hesitation. From where he sat, he looked up once, just briefly, and met the man's eyes. There was no anger there, no satisfaction, just a steady gaze that carried more weight than any punishment ever could. The supervisor approached the man. Sir, he said respectfully, an internal investigation is being initiated. Officer Daniels is being placed on immediate suspension pending review. The man nodded. That's appropriate. The words were simple, but they carried something deeper: acceptance, not triumph. The crowd reacted differently than expected. There were no cheers, no outrage. Instead, people stood quietly, processing what they had witnessed. Someone near the back whispered, "He could have destroyed him." Another replied, "But he didn't." Here's a moment to reflect. When was the last time you saw someone choose restraint when retaliation was easy? If this moment stands out to you, type restaurant in the comments. Officers continued their work methodically. Witnesses spoke. Timelines were established. The system moved forward, not perfectly but deliberately. Daniels sat silently, his head lowered. The weight of consequence pressed down on him, not just the suspension, but the realization that his actions had been exposed without excuse. Before leaving, The man spoke quietly to the veteran officer once more. "Make sure he's offered guidance," he said. "Accountability without direction doesn't lead to change." The officer nodded, visibly affected. "I understand." Daniels heard every word. That, more than anything else, broke him. The crowd began to disperse slowly, conversation subdued and thoughtful. This wasn't a spectacle anymore, it was a lesson. A young man shook his head. "That's real power." A woman replied softly. He didn't need to prove anything. The man took a final look down the street, the place where anger had nearly defined the day. Now it felt different. Quieter. Heavier. Honest. As he turned to leave, a voice called out, "Thank you." He paused for just a moment, then gave a small nod. Nothing more. No speech, no statement, no demand. Just a quiet exit. Behind him, the consequences continued their course, and Officer Daniels, left alone with his thoughts, faced not only discipline, but something far more difficult. The opportunity to change, not because he was forced to, but because he had been shown a better way. The street eventually returned to normal. The lights faded. The officers left. The phones were lowered and slipped back into pockets. But what happened there didn't disappear with the crowd. It stayed. With everyone who witnessed it, and with everyone hearing the story afterward. Because this was never just about a strike. It was about restraint in a moment where retaliation felt justified. About dignity when ego demanded dominance. About choosing responsibility over revenge. The man who walked away that day didn't leave as a winner or a victim. He left as an example. He showed that respect isn't something you give only when it's safe or convenient. It's something you practice when you have the power not to. And that kind of strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't demand attention. It simply stands firm. Officer Daniels would face the consequences of his actions. That was unavoidable. But the more lasting impact wasn't the suspension or the investigation. It was the mirror held up in front of him. A moment where excuses fell away and choice became visible. For the crowd, it was a reminder. Authority doesn't equal righteousness. Calm doesn't mean weakness. And true control begins with self-control. If you're watching this and thinking about a moment in your own life, when anger nearly decided for you, this story matters. Because most turning points don't come with applause. They come quietly, in seconds where you choose who you're going to be. Here's a question worth sitting with when you had the upper hand. What did you do with it? Moments like this don't go viral because they're loud. They stay with us because they're rare. And stories like this, there are more coming. More moments where power is tested. More choices that define character. More lessons that don't rely on force. If you stayed until the end, thank you for giving your time and attention. It means more than you know. Let us know in the comments which part of this story stood out to you the most, and what you'd like to see improved in future videos. Your feedback helps shape what comes next. More good stories are on the way.